What if coming back from a time travel journey was actually the beginning of your suffering? Imagine traveling through time, to the past, the future, it doesn't matter, and then returning to find that something fundamental has changed. Not the world around you, you. The 10 people you're about to meet all survived time travel. But survival came at a cost none of them expected. They're not living anymore. They're drowning in time itself. Number 10, the woman aging in reverse. This case is absolutely chilling, and once you hear it, you'll understand why it made our list. Imagine waking up one morning, looking in the mirror, and realizing you look younger than you did yesterday. At first, you might think it's just good sleep, better lighting, maybe your skincare is finally working. But then it happens again, and again. And suddenly you realize something impossible is happening to your body, something that defies every law of biology. That is exactly what happened to Elena Voss. Elena was a 47-year-old antiques dealer living in Munich, Germany. She had a successful business, a loving husband named Carl, and a completely ordinary life. But in late 2019, Carl started noticing something strange. In photographs taken just weeks apart, Elena looked noticeably different, younger. The fine lines around her eyes seemed softer. The gray streaks in her hair were disappearing. At first, Carl dismissed it as flattering angles or wishful thinking. But then the changes became impossible to ignore. By early 2020, Elena looked like she was in her late 30s. Her skin had tightened. Her energy had increased. Friends who hadn't seen her in months barely recognized her. She looked a decade younger than her actual age. Doctors ran every test imaginable, and what they found left them completely speechless. Her cells were biologically younger than they had been the year before. Not just healthier, younger, as if time itself was moving backward through her body. Elena eventually traced the phenomenon back to a single moment, September 2017. She had purchased a bronze disc at an estate sale, an artifact of unknown origin covered in strange symbols that no expert could identify. The moment she touched it, she felt something move through her body, a pulse, a vibration. She dismissed it at the time as static electricity, but now she believes that was the moment everything changed. Here's where it gets truly disturbing. The physical youth came with a devastating cost. Elena began losing her memories, not randomly, in reverse chronological order. Her most recent memories disappeared first. She forgot conversations from last week, then last month, then last year. By 2022, she no longer remembered her husband's proposal. She couldn't recall their wedding. The last decade of their life together had simply vanished from her mind. She started keeping journals, writing everything down in desperate detail. But every morning, she would read her own entries like a stranger's diary. The woman who wrote those words felt like someone else entirely. Carl would show her photographs of their vacations, their anniversaries, moments they had shared. Elena would stare at them blankly, searching for recognition that never came. Medical researchers who studied her case were baffled. Some theorized that the artifact contained what they called stored temporal energy, a kind of concentrated time that reversed her personal timeline when she made contact. Others believed she had become unstuck from linear time, her body now moving backward through her own existence, while her consciousness struggled to keep up. The symbols on the disc remain untranslated to this day. Similar patterns appear in no known historical record. Elena Voss is now biologically 23 years old. She doesn't recognize her husband. She barely remembers her own career, her own achievements, her own identity. Carl still visits her every day, introducing himself each time, hoping that something will spark. It never does. Doctors estimate that within 2 years, she will reach childhood, both mentally and physically. Her mind will regress to match her body. And then what? Will she forget how to speak? How to walk? Will she simply vanish entirely, erased by her own reverse timeline? She's not growing younger. She's being unmade. Every day, another piece of who she was disappears forever. The artifact sits in a sealed case in a Munich laboratory. Elena no longer remembers why it's there or what it did to her. She only knows that something is wrong, that the face in the mirror doesn't match the fragments of memory she still holds. Elena Voss is drowning in her own vanishing past. And the next case is somehow even more disturbing. Number 9, the Stockholm footage. This case will make you question everything you think you know about time. Imagine you're reviewing old security footage, Hours of grainy recordings from decades past. Boring work, routine. And then you see something that makes your blood run cold. The same man, the same face, the same clothes. Appearing in footage from 3 completely different decades. Not someone who looks similar, identical. That is exactly what happened to Lars Eriksson, and what he discovered still haunts him today. Lars was a Swedish security consultant hired in 2021 by a major Stockholm corporation to review their archived surveillance footage. The company had cameras running since the late 1980s, and they needed someone to catalog and organize decades of recordings. It was tedious, mind-numbing work, until Lars noticed something impossible. A man in a gray coat carrying a leather bag appeared in footage from 1987. The same man appeared in footage from 2003. And again, in 2021, same face, same height, same coat, same bag. He hadn't aged a single day across 34 years. Lars ran the images through facial recognition software. The result came back at a 99.7% match. This wasn't a relative. This wasn't a coincidence. This was the same person appearing across 3 different decades without showing any signs of aging. Absolutely insane. Lars became obsessed. He dug deeper into the archives and found more appearances. The man showed up in 1991, in 1996, in 2008, in 2015. Always the same street corner in central Stockholm. Always alone. Sometimes walking quickly, as if rushing somewhere important. Sometimes standing completely still, looking around with what appeared to be confusion or fear. But the 2021 footage showed something different, something that changed everything. In that recording, the man stopped walking. He turned slowly and looked directly at the camera. His lips moved. He was saying something. Lars hired professional lip readers to analyze the footage. They worked for 3 days before delivering their findings. The man had spoken 6 words in Swedish. "I can't stop. Please help me." Lars searched missing persons databases going back decades, and he found a match that made his stomach drop. Henrik Linkfist. Reported missing in Stockholm in 1985. Never found. No body, no evidence. He simply vanished one October afternoon and was never seen again. The photograph in the missing persons file was unmistakable. It was the man from the footage. Henrik would be 76 years old today. The man in the recordings looks no older than 40. Physicists consulted by Lars proposed a terrifying theory. Henrik may be experiencing involuntary temporal displacement. He's not choosing to appear in these moments. He's being thrown through time against his will, skipping across decades like a stone across water. Each appearance may last only seconds from his perspective. He blinks, and years have passed. He takes a breath, and the world has changed around him. He's aging, but not at our rate. For us, decades pass. For him, perhaps only hours. In August 2023, new footage emerged from the same street corner. Henrik Linkfist appeared again. Same gray coat, same leather bag. But this time, something was different. He looked older, exhausted. His shoulders slumped. His movements were slower, heavier, like a man carrying an unbearable weight. He stood on that corner for 11 seconds before vanishing from frame. 11 seconds that may have cost him another decade of his life. Henrik Linkfist has been trapped for nearly 40 years. 40 years of jumping through time without control, without warning, without hope. Every time he appears, he tries to communicate, to ask for help. But before anyone can reach him, he's gone again, pulled forward into another year, another decade, another world he doesn't recognize. He's not missing. He never was. He's been here the whole time, drowning in decades he cannot control, watching the world change around him in violent lurches while he remains frozen at 40 years old. And that's not even close to the worst of it. The next case will truly disturb you. Number 8, the man who remembers tomorrow. This case is going to change the way you think about memory, about time, about fate itself. Imagine knowing exactly what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next year, not guessing, not predicting, remembering things that haven't happened yet, with perfect clarity, as if you lived them already. Now imagine that no matter what you do, you can't change a single thing. That is the nightmare Marcus Webb has lived every single day since 2015. Marcus was a British accountant living in Leeds, 52 years old, unremarkable career. quiet life. In February 2015, he went in for a routine medical procedure. Something went wrong. His heart stopped. For 4 minutes and 23 seconds, Marcus Webb was clinically dead. Doctors worked frantically to revive him, and they succeeded. But when Marcus opened his eyes, he was no longer the same man. Something had happened during those 4 minutes, something impossible. Marcus didn't see a tunnel of light. He didn't meet deceased relatives or experience peaceful warmth. Instead, his consciousness was pulled forward. He lived 30 years of the future in 4 minutes of death. He experienced everything: marriages, divorces, career changes, the births of grandchildren, world events, wars, elections, disasters. All of it compressed into a fraction of time, then burned permanently into his memory. When he woke up in that hospital bed, gasping for air, he remembered all of it, every detail, every moment, every tragedy that hadn't happened yet. At first, Marcus dismissed it as hallucinations, vivid dreams caused by oxygen deprivation, the brain's final fireworks before death. But then things started happening. A coworker he barely knew was killed in a car accident. Marcus had seen it. He remembered attending her funeral, a funeral that took place 2 weeks after he woke up. A politician resigned in scandal. Marcus remembered reading about it years ago, in a future that was now his past. A plane crashed in Southeast Asia. Marcus had watched the news coverage in his memories before the plane ever left the ground. He started writing everything down, detailed predictions with timestamps, sealed in envelopes and deposited with lawyers, accountants, anyone who would hold them. When the envelopes were opened months or years later, they matched newspaper headlines word for word. Psychiatric evaluations found no signs of delusion, no history of mental illness. Just a man with impossible knowledge and no explanation for how he obtained it. Then Marcus tried to intervene. He warned people, called authorities with anonymous tips about disasters he remembered, sent letters to strangers about accidents he knew would kill them. He begged his coworker not to drive that morning. She laughed and drove anyway. He reported the doomed flight to aviation authorities. They found nothing wrong and cleared it for takeoff. Every single time, the events happened anyway, sometimes differently, sometimes through bizarre coincidences that defied probability, but always with the same outcome. The future, it seemed, was fixed. Marcus could see it, but he couldn't touch it. Researchers who studied his case proposed a disturbing theory. During those 4 minutes of death, Marcus's consciousness may have been projected forward through time. He didn't see the future, he lived it. And now he carries those memories like scars, watching the world slowly catch up to what he already knows. Some believe that observation itself locks events into place. By remembering the future, Marcus may have made it inevitable. Marcus Webb knows the exact date his wife will die. He's known since 2015. He's already mourned her. He's already grieved at her funeral, held her cold hand, spoken at her service. And she's still alive right now, making dinner, watching television, completely unaware. He also knows when he will die, and how. He carries his own death inside his head like a countdown timer he can never escape. Marcus Webb is drowning in foreknowledge. He lives surrounded by ghosts who haven't died yet, watching a future he can see but never change. And what's coming next makes his story look almost peaceful. Number 7, the São Paulo Loop. This case is one of the most terrifying we've ever covered. Imagine going to bed on a completely ordinary Saturday night. You fall asleep. You wake up the next morning. But it's not Sunday. It's Saturday again. The same Saturday. And no matter what you do, no matter how far you run, you can't escape it. You live the same day. You die the same night. And then you wake up again. That is the living nightmare of Isabella Santos, and she's still trapped inside it right now. Isabella was a 34-year-old teacher living in São Paulo, Brazil. March 7th, 2020 was supposed to be an ordinary day. She woke up at 6 in the morning, made coffee, graded papers, called her mother. Nothing special, nothing strange. She went to bed that night expecting to wake up on March 8th. Instead, she woke up on March 7th again. At first, Isabella thought she was confused. Maybe she had dreamed the previous day. Maybe her phone had glitched. But then it happened again. And again, and again. Every single day, Isabella wakes up at exactly 6 a.m. on March 7th, 2020. Every single night, at exactly 11:47 p.m., she dies. The method changes. Sometimes it's a car accident, sometimes a heart attack, Sometimes a fall downstairs she's walked 1,000 times. Once her apartment caught fire. Once she simply stopped breathing. But the time never changes. 11:47 p.m. every single night. And then she opens her eyes, and it's 6 a.m. again. March 7th. The same morning, the same coffee, the same sunlight through the same window. Isabella has lived this day over 2,400 times. She keeps count. She keeps journals. She photographs every entry. And somehow the photos survive each reset. She has memorized every conversation that happens around her, every television broadcast, every stranger's face on her street. She knows exactly when the neighbor's dog will bark, when the bus will pass, when the rain will start at 3:47 p.m. and stop at 4:12. She has tried everything imaginable to break the cycle, staying awake for the entire 24 hours, traveling as far from São Paulo as possible, ending things on her own terms before 11:47 arrives. Nothing works. The loop resets. March 7th begins again. But Isabella discovered something that offers a tiny fragment of hope. Distance matters. The farther she travels from São Paulo, the weaker the loop seems to become. At 200 kilometers away, her time of death shifts by a few minutes. At 500 kilometers, she once survived past midnight. For 11 precious minutes, she experienced March 8th before being pulled back. But she's never escaped completely. Something always drags her back to that morning. Researchers who analyzed her journals believe Isabella accidentally stepped through what they call a temporal fold. Near her apartment, a construction site had been excavating for months. They may have disturbed something beneath the earth, a location where time bends differently than anywhere else. The fold trapped her personal timeline in a closed loop, forever circling back to its starting point. São Paulo itself became her anchor, a cage made of hours and minutes. Isabella Santos is still trapped. Right now, as you watch this, she's somewhere inside her endless March 7th. Maybe she's eating lunch for the 2,000th time. Maybe she's watching a movie she's memorized frame by frame. Maybe she's screaming into a void that resets before anyone can hear her. She will die tonight at 11:47. She will wake tomorrow in the same yesterday. For over 6 years of her subjective experience, she has drowned in the same 24 hours. And for the rest of us, that day passed once and never came back. She's still there, trapped, alone, dying and waking and dying again. Most viewers watching right now aren't subscribed, which means you might miss the next case entirely. Hit subscribe and the bell right now. Trust me, the next story changes everything. Number 6, 4.7 seconds behind. This case is unlike anything you've ever heard. Imagine reaching out to touch someone you love and watching your hand pass right through them. Imagine hearing every conversation on a delay, always responding too late, always missing the moment. Imagine existing in the same room as everyone else, but being completely unable to make contact. That is the reality of Dr. Anton Morazzov, and he's been living it for over 6 years. Anton was a Russian physicist working at a classified research facility outside Moscow. His team specialized in temporal displacement, attempting to create micro-delays in localized time fields. The goal was simple in theory: generate an electromagnetic bubble where time moves slightly slower than the surrounding environment. If successful, the applications would be revolutionary. Medical procedures performed in slowed time. Manufacturing processes stretched across impossible intervals. The future of science itself. In November 2018, they finally achieved a stable field. And then, everything went horribly wrong. During the experiment, a containment barrier failed. The temporal bubble collapsed inward instead of dissipating safely. Anton was standing too close. The unstable field washed over him like a wave before anyone could react. When the energy cleared, Anton appeared completely unharmed. He was standing, breathing, conscious. His colleagues rushed toward him, shouting his name, reaching out to help. But Anton didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at empty space, his hand raised as if reaching for something that wasn't there. It took them 3 days to understand what had happened. Dr. Anton Morazzov now exists exactly 4.7 seconds behind the rest of reality. When someone speaks to him, he doesn't hear the words until 4.7 seconds after they are spoken. When he reaches for an object, his hand arrives at the position where it was, not where it is. He watches conversations unfold around him in broken fragments, hearing answers before he hears questions, seeing reactions before he sees their causes. The world moves forward. Anton is perpetually catching up. The implications are devastating. He cannot touch anything that moves. His hand passes through coffee cups that have already been lifted, through doorknobs that have already turned, through people who have already stepped away. To interact with any object, it must be placed in front of him and left completely motionless for at least 5 seconds. Even then, the coordination is agonizing. He reaches for food that his eyes tell him is elsewhere. He grasps at stillness while motion happens all around him. Human contact has become impossible. His wife tried to hold his hand in the early weeks. She stood perfectly still, waiting, and for one brief moment their fingers touched. But humans cannot remain truly motionless. She shifted slightly, instinctively, and his hand passed through hers like smoke. She described the sensation as cold emptiness, like reaching into a void. Anton felt nothing at all. He hasn't touched another person since. Communication happens through written messages, carefully timed and left in place for him to read. Video calls are impossible. The delay creates incomprehensible chaos. His colleagues developed a system of notes and gestures, a language built around his displacement. But every interaction reminds him of what he's lost. Every conversation is a reminder that he exists adjacent to the world, never quite inside it. Researchers believe the accident fractured his personal timeline, offsetting it from our collective present by a fixed interval. He's not living in the past. He's living in a parallel now that runs perpetually behind ours. Every attempt to resynchronize him has failed. The offset appears permanent, burned into his existence at a fundamental level. Dr. Anton Morazzov still works. He still communicates. He still exists. But he hasn't touched another human being in over 6 years. He watches life happen around him like a film with lagging audio, always slightly out of sync, always reaching for a world that's already moved on. He's drowning in delay, trapped 4.7 seconds away from everyone he loves. And believe me, the next case is going to haunt you. Number 5, the Harmon twins. This case is absolutely heartbreaking, and it raises questions about time that nobody can answer. Imagine having an identical twin, someone who shares your face, your DNA, your entire existence. You've been inseparable since before birth. And then one day, something happens, something that tears time itself apart between you. One of you begins aging rapidly, racing toward death. The other stops aging completely, frozen forever. That is exactly what happened to Sophie and Olivia Harmon, and their story will stay with you long after this video ends. Sophie and Olivia were identical twins from Wyoming, 26 years old in 2019. Same schools, same interests, same dreams. They finished each other's sentences and felt each other's pain. In July 2019, they planned a camping trip in Bighorn National Forest, a remote wilderness area they had visited since childhood. They set up their tent near a creek, built a fire, watched the stars emerge. It was supposed to be a perfect weekend. Neither of them remembers what happened next. They recall strange lights moving across the sky, a feeling of pressure building in their chests, a humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then nothing. 4 hours of complete blackness. When they regained consciousness, they were lying in their tent as if nothing had happened. The fire had burned down to embers. The stars had shifted position. But they felt fine. They packed up the next morning and drove home, confused but unharmed. At least that's what they believed. Within weeks, Olivia started looking different. Fine lines appeared around her eyes. Gray hairs emerged at her temples. Her movements became slower, heavier, as if gravity was pulling harder on her than everyone else. Doctors ran tests and discovered something impossible. Olivia's cells were aging at approximately 10 times the normal human rate. For every month that passed, her body experienced nearly a year. But Sophie hadn't changed at all. Not a single wrinkle, not a single gray hair. Her biological markers remained frozen at exactly 26 years old. The twins share identical DNA. They grew up in the same environment, ate the same food, breathed the same air. Whatever happened in Bighorn that night affected their relationship to time in completely opposite directions. Olivia was accelerating. Sophie was frozen. It was as if the universe had to balance itself, taking from one sister what it gave to the other. By 2022, Olivia appeared to be in her 70s. By 2023, she looked older than their grandmother. She needed assistance walking. Her memory began to fade. She would look at Sophie and struggle to recognize the face that had once been identical to her own. Sophie held her sister's wrinkled hands and saw her own future and past, colliding in the worst possible way. She was watching her twin die of old age while she remained untouched by time. Olivia Harmon passed away in January 2024. Biologically, she was 89 years old. Chronologically, she was 31. Sophie stood at the funeral looking exactly as she had 5 years earlier. Mourners whispered. Some couldn't look at her. She was a living reminder of what her sister had lost. Sophie is 31 now. She still looks 26. Medical tests confirm she hasn't aged a single day since that night in Bighorn. She may never age again. Both twins drowned in time that night. One was pulled under by years that crushed her in months. The other was left floating on the surface, unable to sink, unable to follow where her sister went. Sophie will watch everyone she loves grow old and die. She will remain unchanged, frozen in a body that July couldn't release. She lost her twin to time, and time refuses to let her go. If you've made it this far, you need to subscribe. 87% of viewers aren't subscribed, and the cases only get more intense from here. Don't miss what comes next. Subscribe now. Number 4, the man who woke up 57 years in the past. This case is going to break your mind. Imagine falling asleep in your own bed, in your own apartment, in the year 2019. Everything is normal, everything is familiar, and then you open your eyes and you're 8 years old again. You're in your childhood bedroom. Your parents are alive. Your entire adult life hasn't happened yet, but you remember all of it, every single moment. That is exactly what happened to James Whitfield, and he's been living with the consequences ever since. James was a 58-year-old American businessman living in Chicago. On the night of October 14th, 2019, he went to bed like any other night. He had meetings scheduled for the next morning, emails to answer, a life waiting to continue. He closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. When he opened them again, the world had changed completely. He was lying in a small bed with rocket ship sheets. Posters of astronauts covered the walls. Sunlight streamed through a window he hadn't seen in 50 years. He was in his childhood home in suburban Illinois. The date was October 15th, 1962. James describes the first hours as pure psychological torture. He stumbled to the bathroom and saw a child's face staring back at him in the mirror. His face, 8 years old, but behind those young eyes was a 58-year-old man screaming in confusion. He could remember everything about his adult life, his career, his marriage, his children, but none of it had happened yet. His wife was a toddler somewhere in another state. His children wouldn't be born for decades. His parents, long dead in 2019, were downstairs making breakfast as if nothing was wrong. James made a decision that would define the rest of his second life. He would document everything. He wrote detailed predictions about the future and sealed them in envelopes, safety deposit boxes, time capsules buried in locations only he would remember. Stock market movements, political assassinations, technological breakthroughs, natural disasters. He gave specific instructions to lawyers and accountants, demanding that certain documents be opened on certain dates. He was meticulous. He was obsessive. He was terrified that no one would ever believe him. Decades passed. The predictions came true. Every single one. The Kennedy assassination, the moon landing, the fall of the Soviet Union, the rise of the internet. James became extraordinarily wealthy, investing in companies before they existed, buying land before cities expanded into suburbs. People called him a genius, a visionary. He never corrected them. How could he explain that he wasn't predicting the future? He was remembering it, but James's memories only extend to October 14th, 2019, the night he originally fell asleep. Beyond that point, there is nothing. No knowledge, no foresight, just darkness. And that date is approaching again. In his current linear experience, James is now 83 years old. He's lived through the same decades twice, watching history repeat with perfect precision, and in 6 months, he will catch up to himself. He will reach the night everything changed. What happens then? James doesn't know. Does he loop again, waking up once more as an 8-year-old boy? Does he simply cease to exist? erased at the boundary of his own timeline? Does he finally move forward into unknown territory, experiencing days he's never seen before? The uncertainty tortures him. He's spent 61 years preparing for a moment he cannot understand. James Whitfield has lived 2 lifetimes back to back. He buried his parents twice. He watched historical tragedies unfold, knowing he couldn't stop them. He married a different woman the second time, unable to recreate the life he'd lost. His original children were never born. He mourned them like ghosts who never existed. Now he sits in his study, watching the calendar advance toward October 2019, counting down to the edge of everything he knows. He's drowning in a second lifetime, and he's almost reached the shore. But he doesn't know if salvation or oblivion waits on the other side. And what comes next is somehow even more disturbing. Number 3, the Krakow recordings. This case is going to chill you to the bone. Imagine moving into a beautiful old apartment in a historic European city. The building has character, history, stories soaked into every wall. And then, late at night, you start hearing voices. Not from neighbors, not from the street, from somewhere else entirely. Voices speaking in a language you understand, but a dialect that hasn't been used in 80 years. Voices that know your name. That is exactly what happened to Eva Noak, and what she discovered still haunts her today. Eva was a 29-year-old Polish graphic designer who moved into an apartment in Krakow's historic district in January 2022. The building dated back to the 1890s, renovated multiple times over the decades. Her unit had been vacant for over 10 years before she signed the lease. The landlord couldn't explain why. Previous tenants had simply left, breaking leases, forfeiting deposits. Eva didn't care. The apartment was beautiful, affordable, and exactly what she wanted. Within 3 weeks, she understood why everyone else had fled. It started with sounds at night, conversations drifting through the walls when she was trying to sleep. A woman's voice, a man's voice, a child crying softly, dishes clattering in a kitchen that didn't exist. Eva checked with the building manager. The apartments on either side were empty. No one lived above her. No one lived below. She was completely alone on her floor. But the voices continued every night, growing clearer, growing louder. Eva began recording the sounds on her phone. She captured hours of conversations, arguments, lullabies sung to a crying child. She sent the recordings to linguistic experts at Jagiellonian University. Their analysis came back with results that made her blood run cold. The speech patterns, vocabulary, and dialect dated to the 1940s. The voices were speaking Polish as it was spoken during World War II. The conversations referenced streets, shops, and people from Nazi-occupied Krakow. Eva researched the building's history and discovered something terrible. During the German occupation, a Jewish family had hidden in a concealed space within the walls. A mother, a father, a young daughter. They survived there for nearly 2 years, protected by the building's owner. In 1943, they were discovered by Nazi soldiers conducting a search. They were dragged from their hiding place in the middle of the night. None of them were ever seen again. Then the voices changed. They started acknowledging Eva's presence. The first time it happened, she dropped her phone and couldn't breathe for a full minute. The woman's voice, clear as day, spoke directly to her. "Eva, can you hear us?" She heard her own name coming from 1943. After that, it happened regularly. They asked her questions. They pleaded with her. "Eva, please help us. They're coming. Eva, please." The child's voice was the worst, crying, asking why the nice lady wouldn't answer. Experts analyzed Eva's recordings extensively. No signs of manipulation, no audio artifacts suggesting fabrication. The voices were real, captured on modern equipment, speaking from 8 decades in the past. Some researchers believe Eva's apartment exists at what they call a thin point, a location where 2 moments in time overlap. The trauma of 1943 may have created a permanent scar, an echo that never stopped reverberating. Eva wasn't hearing recordings. She was in contact with people who were still, somehow, experiencing that night. Eva moved out in 2023. She couldn't bear it anymore. The voices begging for help she couldn't give. The child crying for comfort she couldn't provide. But leaving didn't end it. She still hears them sometimes, even in her new apartment across the city. Faint whispers at 3 a.m, her name spoken by a woman who died before Eva was born. The voices followed her, Or perhaps she carries them now, a permanent connection to a moment frozen in horror. Eva Noak is drowning in their desperation. She lies awake at night, listening to people beg for rescue 80 years after they were taken. She cannot save them. She cannot silence them. She can only witness their final hours, over and over, forever. But wait until you hear what's next. This one might keep you up tonight. Number 2. The Müller family photographs. This case is deeply unsettling, and it raises questions about death, time, and reality that nobody wants to ask. Imagine looking through recent family photographs and noticing someone in the background who shouldn't be there, someone who died 30 years ago. And then imagine watching that person appear in more photographs, getting closer each time, looking directly at the camera. That is exactly what the Müller family experienced, and what they discovered has terrified them ever since. The Müller family lives in Munich, Germany. Heinrich Müller was the family patriarch, a kind and quiet man who passed away in 1994 at the age of 71. He was mourned, buried in the family plot, remembered fondly at holidays. His death was never in question. There was a funeral, there was a grave, there was closure. Until 2021, when Heinrich started appearing in photographs again. The family first noticed him in the background of a birthday photo taken at a restaurant, barely visible, slightly blurred, standing near the entrance. At first, they assumed it was a stranger who happened to resemble their late grandfather, a coincidence, an odd similarity. But then he appeared in another photograph from a different event, clearer this time, closer, standing behind the family, looking directly at the camera, same face, same age he was in 1994, same suit he was buried in. Over 18 months, Heinrich appeared in over 30 family photographs, birthdays, weddings, holiday gatherings. He was always in the background at first, always slightly out of focus. But with each new appearance, he moved closer. His features became sharper. His expression became more distinct. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning. He was simply watching, his eyes fixed on the camera with an intensity that made everyone uncomfortable. The family hired digital forensics experts to analyze the photographs. Every image was verified as authentic. No manipulation, no editing, no signs of doctoring whatsoever. The metadata confirmed the dates and locations. The lighting and shadows matched the environment perfectly. Heinrich Müller was genuinely present in these photographs, appearing in moments captured decades after his death. The most disturbing image came in January 2023. The family gathered at the cemetery to visit Heinrich's grave on the anniversary of his passing. Someone took a group photograph in front of his headstone. When they looked at the image later, they couldn't breathe. Heinrich was standing behind them, looking over their shoulders at his own grave. In his hands he held a small handwritten sign. The writing was clearly visible. It showed the current date, and below it, a single word: soon. The family stopped taking photographs after that. They couldn't bear to see what might appear next. But stopping didn't bring peace. Family members report feeling a presence in rooms, shadows in peripheral vision, the sensation of being watched during ordinary moments. Heinrich's daughter swears she saw him standing at the foot of her bed one night just for a moment before he vanished. Some researchers believe Heinrich didn't actually die in 1994. They theorize he was somehow pulled forward through time at the moment of death, trapped between his final heartbeat and whatever comes after. He may be trying to return, to anchor himself back in linear time. Each photograph could represent an attempt to break through, to make himself visible, to cross back into the world he was torn from. Others believe something darker is happening. The sign he held said soon. Soon could mean his return. Or it could mean something else entirely. Perhaps he's not trying to come back. Perhaps he's waiting for them to join him. The Müller family lives in fear now. They feel him everywhere, even when they can't see him. Heinrich is drowning somewhere between 1994 and the present, caught in a space that shouldn't exist, fighting to reach a family that doesn't know whether to hope for his return or dread it. And then there's the final case, the one that makes all the others feel almost normal. Number 1, the fading man. This is the most disturbing case we've ever covered. Imagine looking in the mirror one morning and noticing something wrong with your reflection. Not a blemish, not a mark, something deeper. You look faded, transparent, like you're becoming less real. And then imagine watching old photographs of yourself change, your image growing fainter while everyone else stays sharp. Imagine people who knew you struggling to remember your name. That is exactly what is happening to Christopher Strand, and it's getting worse every single day. Christopher was a 38-year-old Canadian software developer living in Toronto. Ordinary job, ordinary apartment, ordinary life. In early 2020, he noticed something strange about his reflection. It seemed slightly faded, as if the mirror wasn't quite capturing him properly. He assumed it was the lighting, exhaustion, his imagination. But then he started appearing washed out in photographs, not overexposed, not blurry, transparent. You could see objects behind him through his body. Within months, he was visibly translucent in certain lighting conditions. Christopher Strand was fading from existence. The phenomenon accelerated in ways that defied every known law of physics. Old photographs of Christopher began changing. Childhood pictures, school portraits, wedding photos. His image grew fainter in all of them, as if he was being erased backward through time. His mother pulled out a family album and gasped. In photos where Christopher once stood clearly, only a vague outline remained. Some images showed nothing but empty space where he used to be. Then the memories started disappearing. Childhood friends began losing recollections of him. They couldn't remember shared experiences, inside jokes, years of friendship. His college roommate called him one day, confused, asking who he was and why his number was in his phone. Official records developed impossible inconsistencies. His birth certificate became harder to read, the ink seemingly fading on the page. His social security number generated errors in government databases. His driver's license photo showed a ghostly smear where his face should be. Christopher believes he knows what's happening. He's convinced that a version of himself from another timeline is overwriting his existence. In his video diaries, recorded while he can still be captured on camera, he explains his theory with terrifying calmness. "There can only be one of me," he says, "and I'm the wrong one. Reality is correcting an error. I am the error." He believes the universe is eliminating a duplicate, erasing every trace that he ever existed. Physicists who reviewed his case proposed a chilling framework. Christopher may be what they call a temporal remnant, a person who exists in a timeline that was never supposed to happen. When parallel timelines collapse or merge, duplicates must be eliminated to maintain consistency. The universe doesn't allow contradictions. Christopher isn't dying. He's being deleted, removed from the fabric of reality itself, his existence scrubbed from past, present, and future simultaneously. Christopher Strand is approximately 40% transparent now. In direct sunlight, you can see through him clearly. His outline wavers like heat rising from pavement. His wife has started forgetting things, their first date, their wedding vows. She pauses when she says his name, a flicker of confusion crossing her face, as if she's not entirely sure she remembers who he is. His parents call less frequently. When they do, conversations feel strained, distant, like speaking to a stranger they can't quite place. Christopher records video messages every day, desperate documentation of a man who may soon leave no evidence he ever lived. But each recording becomes harder to see. His voice grows fainter. His image grows dimmer. The camera struggles to focus on something that barely exists anymore. He estimates he has less than a year before he vanishes completely, before photographs show only empty rooms, before memories contain only nameless gaps, before Christopher Strand becomes a person who never was. He's not surviving time travel. He's being unmade by it, erased from a reality that decided he doesn't belong. And that raises the question none of us want to ask. If the universe can delete him, what's stopping it from deleting any of us? How would we even know if we were next? 10 survivors, 10 impossible stories, 10 people trapped in a dimension we all call time, but can no longer navigate. Are they cautionary tales, warnings from a future we haven't reached yet, or living proof that the fabric of time is far more fragile than any of us ever believed? Only you can decide what's real. Subscribe now. The next video might just change everything you think you know. What if you're already drowning too?